Welcome back to the Unseen Podcast, a podcast dedicated to missing people, unresolved cases and UK true crime. Today we are going to explore the infamous case of Janice Weston near Brampton in Cambridge in 1983. 36-year-old Janice was found dead in a lay-by on the A1 motorway, and her murder was not only shocking but confusing. After her death, a large-scale investigation was launched, which attracted national attention, and over the years the motive for her murder has been speculated upon. This episode contains descriptions that some listeners may find distressing, so listener discretion is advised. At around 9 a.m. on Sunday the 11th of September 1983, David Hurst was cycling along a stretch of the A1, close to Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. He was training for a timed trial that he was going to be taking part in for his cycling club, and had arranged for his wife to accompany him at different points along the route to help with refreshments. He spotted his wife parked in their car in a lay-by and pulled in to meet her. As David pulled in and got off his bike to speak to his wife, he turned and spotted something in the undergrowth at the side of the lay-by. When he looked a little closer, he realised what he was seeing. The body of a woman lay by the side of the lay-by, and it was clear from her visible injuries that she had been attacked. The police were quickly called, and when they arrived they were greeted with a very gruesome scene. The woman had some severe injuries, particularly from what looked like multiple blows to the head. The injuries were so severe that the police found it difficult to even describe her features. This meant that they also struggled to identify her. The woman did not have any identification or seem to have any belongings. She was wearing a watch which they noted had stopped at around 1:29, and it was speculated that this must have been the time that she was attacked. There was nothing found in the surrounding areas of the lay-by or the A1. Police had to rely on more traditional methods to try and identify the woman. It took 3 days before they had a conclusive answer. The woman was 36-year-old Janice Weston, and it was evident that she had been murdered. The scene was both horrific and baffling. How had Janice got to the lay-by, and who had decided to murder her by the side of the road? The police immediately began to gather as much information as they could about the crime, with Detective Chief Superintendent Len Bradley from Cambridgeshire Police heading up the investigation. One of the first tasks that police had to carry out was to find out more about Janice Weston and her movements before her discovery in the lay-by. Janice Weston was 36 years old at the time of her murder and was a successful solicitor. She was a partner in a law firm called Charles Russell and Company in London and lived in a flat in Addison Avenue in the area of Notting Hill, West London. Janice was ambitious and hard-working, and had become known as an international expert in company law. Her most recent project had been writing a book about computer technology data protection. She was known to her friends and acquaintances as successful and sociable with a wide circle of friends. She was doing very well with her career and also in her private life, as just 15 months before her murder she had also got married to a property developer called Tony Weston. The couple had just bought a country house in the area of Clopton, close to Northampton, and they were in the process of having the house renovated and turned into luxury apartments. The pair were planning out their life together and both knew where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. This was the way that Janice's life was leading up to September 1983. A later Crimewatch Reconstruction, which was aired in October 1984, discussed the timeline that the police were able to create about Janice's movements around the time that she was murdered. Detectives discovered that Janice was in London the weekend of the 10th of September, and that she had been seen out and about close to her home and work on that Saturday, the day before she was discovered. On that day at around 11:20 a.m, Janice visited Kensington Tyre Motors in West London. It was known that she visited the garage to pick up a new spare tyre for her car, an Alfa Romeo Alfetta. Janice picked up the spare tyre from the garage and placed it in her boot. From eyewitness testimonies, police were able to confirm that she then went shopping in the area of Holland Park, close to her home in Addison Avenue. Janice then proceeded to her office at Lincoln's Inn at some point that afternoon. Friends of Janice's stated that Tony, her husband, was away that weekend in France, and Janice had told them that she was going to stay in London and do some work for some clients. This appears to be what she had in mind when travelling to the office that day. Several eyewitnesses told police that they had seen Janice at the office. She had reportedly been looking out of the window as though she was expecting someone to arrive. Police were able to establish that she had been at the office at around 4:45 p.m, as someone had rang and Janice had answered the phone. She proceeded to take a message for one of her colleagues who was not there at the time. At some point that evening, it was evident that Janice returned back to her flat in Addison Avenue. When the flat was examined, it was discovered that she had come home that night and made herself a meal. This all appeared to fit in with what she had told friends about her plans for that weekend. What happened next, however, did not seem to match her original plans. Janice appeared to leave her flat not long after returning. The odd thing that police later discovered was that when she left, she did not take her handbag with her. The bag was still in the flat with her credit cards and her checkbook. It appeared that she had taken her purse with her, however. The police knew that Janice had left in her car, and the question now was, where was it? They knew that Janice must have driven away in her car, but it had not yet been found. 3 days after the discovery of her body on the 14th of September, the question was answered. In Camden Town, North London, a car was spotted parked on a meter on the street. The car had been there for several days and had caught the attention of locals and the police. When it was examined and checked against various databases, it was found that it was an Alfa Romeo Alfetta and it belonged to Janice Weston. Police searched the car and found a number of things inside. Her purse, which contained £37, was in there and did not appear to have been tampered with. They also found 2 sets of keys. One was for her flat at Addison Avenue, and another set for the country house in Clopton. In the boot, detectives also found an overnight bag that Janice appeared to have packed, along with half of the dinner she seemed to have prepared at home, a half-drunk bottle of wine and half a loaf of bread. One thing that police did not find in the boot, which was strange, was the spare tyre that they knew she had picked up on that Saturday morning. On closer inspection, the spare wheel had been put on the rear side of the car and the original tyre had been removed. This was certainly a puzzling part of the case. It was clear that the car must have moved from the site in the lay-by and parked here not long after the murder. In fact, police later established that it must have been parked there that Sunday, the following day. Why the tyre had been changed at all remained somewhat of a mystery until findings came back from Janice's post-mortem. Grease had been found on her fingers, implying that she may have pulled into the lay-by to change the tyre after discovering that there was a problem. She was only 16 miles away from the country house in Clopton, and as she had the keys to the house with her, police believed that she must have been heading there for the night. She had an overnight bag, which seemed to suggest this. This, however, was also strange, as the house was undergoing renovation, and there weren't really any suitable places to stay for the night. This was also not what she had told friends that she had planned for that weekend. Police investigated Janice's route that evening from her flat to where her body was found, and established that she must have arrived at the Huntingdon stretch of the A1, where the lay-by was located, at around 9 p.m. The traffic had been heavy that night, and it would have taken her longer to get there than usual. It's thought that she had then pulled in to change the tyre, and this is where she was attacked. This breakdown of her timeline on that Saturday meant that officers could appeal for anyone who was on that stretch of road at the time and may have seen something suspicious or odd at the scene. Speculation about who had attacked Janice by the side of the road was rife, and police spoke to the Liverpool Echo newspaper on the 14th of September, explaining that Janice had been beaten around the head with a blunt instrument by someone, quote, who lost their temper and went berserk. This did not necessarily allay any concerns that the public had about who had committed this crime. Some new information came into police soon after Janice's case began to gain national attention. At around 9 a.m. on Sunday the 11th of September, the day after the discovery of Janice's body, a man had entered CB Car Garage 23 miles away from the lay-by in the town of Royston in North Hertfordshire. He asked the shopkeeper if they sold number plates. The shopkeeper told him that they didn't, but that an auto spares shop just up the road did. The man then entered the shop that had been recommended, and they confirmed that they did sell replacement number plates. The man said that he wanted a new one, and the shopkeeper asked him for the registration number for the plate. The man handed the shopkeeper a scrap of paper with the registration number on, and the shopkeeper said it would be fine and got on with it. This would have been a normal interaction, however the number plate immediately stood out to police. It was KMR 769X, Janice's number plate from her Alfa Romeo. This was definitely a development, and it meant that this person must have been in some way involved with Janice and what happened to her. Otherwise, why else would he be buying a new number plate for her car? This was an important piece of evidence, and one that the police immediately began to look into. There was also another sighting that had come in from witnesses who were in the area of the lay-by at the time that Janice would have been there. It's reported in the Sunday Mirror on the 25th of September that a driver who was passing the area at the time noticed a man standing in the lay-by. The man was described as being smartly dressed, and it appeared that he was standing next to a silver Alfa Romeo. The sighting took place at between 11:45 p.m. and 12 midnight on Saturday the 10th of September. This witness statement was of course of interest to police, who wanted to track down as many people as possible who had been in the area of the lay-by around the time that Janice had been killed. In the days and weeks after Janice's murder, detectives made attempts to get information out of the public in the hope that someone would come forward with vital evidence. It's reported that in early October, police released an image of clothing similar to that she was wearing on the night she was driving down the A1. Janice's face had been superimposed onto an image of a policewoman wearing the clothing, and it was thought that a witness may remember something of importance after viewing the picture. Tips did begin to come in, however they did not lead to anything concrete immediately after the murder. During that same month, it's reported that police did a swoop on a traveller site in Solihull in the West Midlands. This raid on the site was in connection with Janice's case, however no further information was released about how it was related. 36 men were arrested during this swoop, and 2 shotguns were seized. Once again, however, this did not lead to any arrests or suspects being named. Tony Weston, Janice's husband, was also of interest to detectives. Evidence appeared to suggest that Tony was in France at the time of his wife's murder, and that is what Janice had also told friends. Police, however, brought Tony in for questioning on the 16th of December 1983, 2 months after his wife's murder. He was questioned at the police station for 53 hours, before being released on bail on the 18th of December. This drew a large amount of interest in the press, with many newspapers reporting on it. The Sunday Mirror reported that 2 former girlfriends of Mr. Weston had also been questioned. The same article contained a statement from Cambridgeshire police about speaking to Mr. Weston's former girlfriends, stating, "They gave us information which we are now working on, but we are not suggesting in any way either was involved in the killing." When asked by the press about the questioning, Mr. Weston replied, "I have no comment to make." Tony Weston was never charged with anything in relation to his wife's murder, and it's reported in the Camden New Journal that he later complained about the manner in which he was treated during the interview, as he was allegedly shown harrowing photos from the crime scene. Witnesses had reportedly been able to confirm that Mr. Weston had been in France where he was on a business trip. It appeared that the police were coming to a brick wall in the investigation. Over the next few months, police continued to try and track down anyone connected to Janice and her murder. However, they did not find anything new. It was decided to go on the show Crimewatch in autumn of 1984 and distribute a reconstruction of Janice's movements to the public. This could jog someone's memory and also provided crucial details of the crime. Detective Chief Superintendent Len Bradley from Cambridgeshire Police spoke on the show about what the police knew and what they wanted to find out. He explained that they had ruled out a sexual attack or robbery. There were no signs of a sexual motive, and her purse was still in the car with money in it, suggesting that the killer had not been there to steal from her. Detective Superintendent Len Bradley explained that it was possible that Janice knew her attacker and that the killer may well have travelled with her in the car that night. He went on further to state that Janice had most probably stopped to change her wheel, as she had oil on her fingers, and that the pair may have had a disagreement which led to violence. He went on to say that he would like the man who purchased the number plate on that following Sunday to come forward, so he can be investigated and possibly eliminated from their inquiries. He stated that the man may have simply stolen Janice's car after it was left abandoned in the lay-by, and that he had no interest in prosecuting the man for theft of a vehicle. He was only interested in finding out more about Janice's death. Bradley told the public that when the car was stopped in the lay-by, it was facing a northerly direction. It would have had to turn back on itself to head back to London, where it was eventually found. It was believed to have been abandoned before lunchtime on that Sunday, and it was hoped that whoever had left the car there would come forward. There was also another mystery that Bradley addressed on the show, the missing wheel from Janice's car. He explained that the wheel had been removed and was never found. He gave a description of it, stating that it was distinctive. It was an Alfa Romeo wheel with the insignia on it. It also had 20 air vent holes. Bradley went on to appeal to the public to help trace the man who bought the number plate and anyone who may have seen Janice after 4:45 p.m. who could help narrow down her movements when she left the office. He also stated he was interested in hearing from anyone who saw someone acting suspiciously in the lay-by, or when they returned home, including people who came home with blood-stained clothing or got rid of any clothes just after the murder. The police were casting a wide net for anyone with information about the murder, or just anyone acting suspiciously. The fact that the police believed that Janice may have known her killer was also new information, and added a whole new dynamic to the investigation. If Janice had known her killer, what had happened and who were they? After the Crimewatch programme aired, it was reported in the Aberdeen Evening Express that around 100 people rang into the show, and police said that they were following up on all tips that were given. Sadly, despite the national coverage of the case, these tips did not lead to any conclusions. Janice's case began to go cold in subsequent years. Other pieces of information had come in, such as witness sightings of a man with his head under the bonnet of Janice's Alfa Romeo in the lay-by. However, these did not lead to a suspect. The description of this man appeared to broadly match the one given of the man stood in the lay-by, and the one of the man spotted in the shop buying the number plates, which suggested that they may be the same person. However, this was not for certain. Detective Superintendent Len Bradley spoke to the Sunday Mirror about the case in 1987. He was no longer with the police force at this point, but did give a statement about what he thought about the case, saying, "A motive such as robbery or sexual interference was missing. It was indeed a most baffling case. There were so many twists and turns to it, and some key aspects remained unanswered to this day." There was indeed a lack of motive found, and the fact that they could not discover why someone had attacked Janice in such a brutal way caused many roadblocks in the investigation. The puzzling elements of the case, such as the missing tyre, the replacement number plates, and even Janice's reason for going to the country house, all led to a number of theories being presented. These theories ranged from Janice being the target of an assassin or hitman, her coming across a random killer on the roadside, or even something to do with her job in the law firm. Unfortunately, without evidence, none of these theories could be backed up. As the years wore on, many people in the area continued to remember Janice's case and hoped that an arrest would finally be made. In 1991, new information did emerge in Janice's case. At the end of October that year, it was announced that her case was being re-examined, following on from new evidence that had been given to them. Police confirmed at the time that they had received information from a professional killer who was serving a life sentence in prison at the time. Initially, police stated that they did not want to give out any more information about the re-investigation. However, the name of the informant was later confirmed. The man was named Robert Delgado, and he had told police that he knew the man who had killed Janice Weston. He explained that the killer was Charles Fowler, who was a South London criminal. Delgado said that Fowler kidnapped Janice after she discovered a drugs ring, and that Fowler had panicked and beaten her to death. Delgado said that he had found out this information and that he had then killed Fowler and dumped his body in Graffham Water Reservoir, close to Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. Police immediately took this lead seriously and began trawling Graffham Reservoir for any sign of Fowler's body. Frogmen searched the water in early November 1991, however no sign of a body or any other evidence was discovered that could corroborate Delgado's story. Delgado himself was a convicted murderer, having been sentenced to life in prison following the murder of Reginald Blaker in 1988. He, his girlfriend, and a friend, Paul Thomas, had travelled to Blaker's home where he was strangled with a silk scarf and had been beaten around the head. It was plausible, therefore, that Delgado had legitimate information about Janice's murder, however police were unable to corroborate his version of events. Delgado was later attacked in Wormwood Scrubs prison and had severe injuries to his neck. It appeared, despite this new re-investigation, that nothing incriminating had been found, and sadly no new evidence surfaced in the case. In 2018, it was reported that Janice's case had once again been reopened by Cambridgeshire police in an effort to finally solve it. In 2019, the case once again appeared on BBC's Crimewatch Roadshow programme, and details of her murder were presented to the public in the hope that someone would finally come forward. Unfortunately, despite the increased publicity, Janice's case still remains unsolved. A recent police statement read, "Officers from the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit are conducting a review of the murder, exploring new forensic opportunities and appealing for anyone with information to come forward." So what do we know about Janice's murder? There are several very baffling features of Janice's case, however there are things that we do know. Janice left her home in Notting Hill after eating a very light meal and taking some of it with her. She left her bag behind along with her credit cards, but took her purse and keys to her country home. She had told friends that she was staying in London for the weekend and had not said anything about leaving for the country house. She had also taken a half-drunk bottle of wine with her, and friends confirmed that she would not normally drink and drive. It's estimated that she arrived at Huntingdon on the A1 at around 9 p.m. due to heavy traffic, and it was at this point that police believe she pulled into the lay-by to change her tyre. It was then that she was attacked and left by the lay-by. Her car was then taken back to Camden Town, where it was dumped with her purse and money still inside. A man was spotted at the lay-by at around 11:45 p.m, and then a man fitting a similar description bought a replacement number plate for Janice's car the next day. It's probable that the man who bought the number plate was involved in some way with her murder, or at least knew something about the way that the car had been left in the lay-by. Was this her murderer? Another question that often comes up in Janice's case is the question of whether or not she knew the perpetrator. Police at the time speculated that they could have travelled to the area together and had a disagreement. Could this have been a random opportunist attack after Janice pulled in to change her tyre? Whatever the circumstances were, it was clear that it was a violent attack, and Janice did not deserve what happened to her. She was a young, newly married woman who had a good career and her life ahead of her. It's such a shame that she had her life cut short in this awful way. If you know anything about the murder of Janice Weston, please contact the police on 101 and quote Operation Oakmere, or you can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. You can also contact the Cambridgeshire Police at www.cams.police.uk/report. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you want to listen to more on this case, then Jess, over at the Outlines podcast, has also covered Janice's story. I have not listened to it as I like to write my episodes before listening to anyone else's coverage on cases. However, I know Jess does a fantastic job with her research and it will be very detailed. I want to thank all of my patrons for supporting the podcast and for keeping it going every week. It's much appreciated. If you want to get ad-free early access episodes, bonus episodes, stickers and shout-outs, then the link is in the show notes. You can also support us by leaving us a review wherever you listen, or by subscribing to the YouTube channel, where I upload audio from the episodes. If you have any suggestions for future episodes or just have a comment about the podcast, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or you can contact me at theunseenpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks so much for listening and I hope to have you here again next week. As always, I'm Caprice and this has been Unseen.